The Grand Assembly Hall was the largest room Kong Do-yoon had ever seen. It stretched upward for what seemed like forever, with seats carved into the walls in great spiraling circles. 3,000 aliens sat in those seats, watching, whispering, judging. Their bodies came in every shape he could imagine. Some had scales. Some had fur. Some were made of crystal or metal or things he had no words for. All of them looked down at the small human section near the front with the same expression. It was the look someone gives a child who has wandered into a room where adults are talking about serious matters. Do-yeon sat in the front row. He was 22 years old, a cadet at the Coalition Military Academy, and he had refused to sit in the back where the other human cadets had gathered. His friend Yunari sat beside him, her dark eyes scanning the crowd with the quick intelligence that made her the best engineering student in their class. "You should have sat with the others," Nari whispered. "People are staring. Let them stare," Do-yeon replied. His voice was calm, but his hands were tight fists in his lap. The High Chancellor of the Galactic Coalition stood at the center of the hall. Ambassador Velith was a being made entirely of living crystal. And when light hit the Chancellor's body, it scattered into 1,000 tiny rainbows. Beautiful, Do-yeon thought. Beautiful and cold. "We have reviewed humanity's application to join the Vanguard fleet," Velith announced. The Chancellor's voice echoed through the hall like wind through a cave. "The answer, as it has been for 30 years, is no." Do-yeon felt his stomach drop. Around him, alien delegates nodded their heads or made sounds of agreement. Of course, their movements seemed to say, of course the humans were rejected. What else could anyone expect? The Vanguard fleet was the Coalition's most elite military force. For 500 years, it had protected civilized space from every threat imaginable. To serve in the Vanguard was the highest honor any species could achieve. No human had ever worn the Vanguard uniform. No human had ever been allowed to try. "Humanity is a young species," Velith continued. "You have been traveling among the stars for only 300 years. You are fragile. Your bodies break easily. Your ships are small. And most importantly, you lack the certainty that defines a great civilization." Do-yeon felt something hot rise in his chest. It was not quite anger. It was something deeper. Something that had been building for years. "Your species doubts everything," Velith said. "You doubt your leaders. You doubt your scientists. You doubt your own abilities. This is not a quality we wish to bring into our most important fleet. Doubt is weakness. Doubt is failure waiting to happen." Alien delegates made sounds of agreement again. Do-yeon heard laughter from somewhere in the upper rows. Nari grabbed his arm and squeezed hard. "Don't," she whispered. "Whatever you're thinking, don't." But Do-yeon was already standing. The hall fell silent. 3,000 pairs of eyes turned toward the human cadet in the front row who had risen from his seat. Ambassador Velith's crystalline face showed something that might have been surprise. "With respect, Chancellor," Do-yeon said, "doubt is not our weakness. It is our weapon." The silence became heavier. Do-yeon could feel it pressing against his skin. His heart was beating so fast he thought it might break through his chest, but his voice stayed steady. He had practiced being steady his whole life. "May speak, young human," Velith said. There was amusement in the Chancellor's tone. It was the amusement of someone watching a small animal do something unexpected. "Explain what you mean." Do-yeon stepped into the aisle between the seats. He looked up at the thousands of faces staring down at him. Most of them expected him to embarrass himself. Some of them hoped for it. "Every species in this room achieved spaceflight the same way," he said. "You looked at the stars, and you knew. You knew that survival was possible because other species had already survived. You knew that faster-than-light travel could be done because you had seen the proof. You knew you were not alone in the universe because the Coalition had already found you." He turned slowly, meeting as many eyes as he could. Humans had none of that. When our ancestors looked at the void between stars, they saw only darkness and death. Every scientist who pushed us forward, every explorer who left our world, every dreamer who imagined what might be possible, did so while doubting whether any of it could work. We did not know we would survive. We did not know our ships would fly. We did not know anyone was out there waiting for us. His voice grew stronger. We doubted everything. And we did it anyway. We did not conquer doubt. We learned to fight alongside it. Doubt is not what makes us weak. Doubt is what makes us try harder, think faster, refuse to give up. Because when you are certain, you stop looking for better answers. When you doubt, you never stop searching. The hall remained silent, but the quality of the silence had changed. Some of the aliens were leaning forward in their seats. Some were looking at each other with expressions Do-Yan could not read. Ambassador Velith's rainbow light flickered. These are interesting words, Cadet Kong, but words prove nothing. The Vanguard fleet requires more than philosophy. Then test us, Do-Yan said. A massive figure rose from the military section of the hall. Do-Yan recognized Gorveth, a tribunal commander whose species resembled armored dinosaurs from Earth's ancient past. Gorvoth's voice was like rocks grinding together. Pretty words from a pretty child, Gorveth rumbled. The Vanguard has standards that humans cannot meet. This is not cruelty. This is fact. Do-Yan turned to face the commander. Then let us fail. Let us try and fail, and then you will have your proof. Or let us try and succeed, and then you will have to admit you were wrong. From the human delegation's balcony, Lieutenant Park Jisu watched with an expression that gave nothing away. She had served in the coalition military for 15 years. She had heard every excuse, every rejection, every polite dismissal. She had never heard a cadet challenge the entire galaxy before. Velith raised a crystalline hand. What trial do you propose, young human? Do-Yan took a breath. He thought of every human who had ever been told something was impossible. He thought of the ones who had listened and given up, and the ones who had refused to accept the answer. He thought of all the doubts he had carried his whole life. All the fears that had never stopped him from trying. The threshold run, he said. The hall erupted. The noise in the Grand Assembly Hall was like a storm. Aliens shouted in dozens of languages. Some were laughing. Some were angry. Some simply could not believe what they had heard. The threshold run had not been attempted in 200 years. The last species to try had lost 17 ships and 4,000 soldiers. No one spoke of the threshold run as a test anymore. They spoke of it as a death sentence. Yunari had her face buried in her hands. You absolute fool, she muttered. You complete and total fool. Do-Yan stood in the aisle, his heart pounding, waiting for the chaos to settle. He had known this would happen. He had known the moment the words left his mouth that everything would change. There was no going back now. Ambassador Velith raised both crystalline hands, and slowly the hall fell quiet. The Chancellor's body was flickering with colors that Do-Yan did not recognize. Perhaps it was anger. Perhaps it was something else entirely. The threshold run, Velith said slowly, is not a test. It is a journey through the most dangerous region of known space. 7 sectors of gravitational madness, quantum storms, and phenomena that break the laws of physics themselves. The last fleet to enter was commanded by Admiral Sorvith of the Colorian Empire, one of the greatest military minds in galactic history. He had 20 ships, 10,000 soldiers, and technology far beyond what humanity currently possesses. The Chancellor paused. He never returned. No one knows what happened to him. No signal ever came back. The threshold swallowed him whole. Now Do-Yan nodded. I know the history. Then you know you are asking for death. I am asking for a chance. Do-Yan's voice did not waver. If humanity completes the threshold run, you admit us to the Vanguard fleet. Full membership. No more waiting. No more being told we are too young or too fragile or too doubtful. And if you fail, Velith asked, then we prove your assessment correct. You can tell everyone that you were right about us. You can say that humans were exactly as weak as you always believed. The hall was completely silent now. Every delegate was watching. This was a moment that would be remembered for centuries, no matter how it ended. Commander Gorvath stepped forward. The massive reptilian soldier looked down at Do-Yan with eyes that held no warmth. One ship, Gorvath said. You will take one ship, not a fleet. We will not waste resources on this foolishness. One ship is enough. Doyen replied. You will have a crew of no more than 50, all human. No alien advisors, no coalition technology that humans have not earned the right to use. Agreed. Gorvath leaned closer. His breath smelled like metal and fire. And you, little cadet, will be on that ship. If you are brave enough to make this challenge, you will be brave enough to die for it. Doyen met the commander's eyes without flinching. I would not have it any other way. From the balcony, Lieutenant Park Jisoo finally moved. She stood and walked to the railing, looking down at the young cadet who had just gambled humanity's future on a single throw of the dice. She did not cane. Oh, whether to admire him or arrest him for stupidity? Ambassador Velith studied Doyen for a long moment. The Chancellor's crystalline body caught the light, and scattered it across the walls of the hall in patterns that looked almost like writing. You understand that the Coalition cannot be held responsible for what happens to you. If you enter the threshold and die, we will not send rescue. We will not search for your bodies. You will simply be gone. We understand, Doyen said. To speak for all of humanity? Doyen hesitated. He was one cadet. He had no authority to speak for his entire species. But someone had to. Someone always had to be the first to stand up and say the words that everyone else was afraid to speak. I speak for everyone who has ever been told they cannot do something, he said. I speak for everyone who has been dismissed and ignored and pushed aside. I speak for every human who has looked at the impossible and decided to try anyway. Yes, I speak for all of humanity. The hall held its breath. Velif's colors settled into a cool blue. Very well, Cadet Kang, you have your trial. You have 3 weeks to assemble your crew and prepare your ship. The Coalition will provide one observation vessel to follow at a safe distance and record your attempt. When you fail, the galaxy will have a record of humanity's final embarrassment. When we succeed, Doyen replied, the galaxy will have a record of how wrong you were. For the first time, something that might have been respect flickered across Velith's features. Bold words. I hope your actions can match them. The Chancellor turned away, and the session was dismissed. Aliens began filing out of the hall, talking among themselves in excited whispers. This was the most interesting thing that had happened in the Coalition in decades. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Nari grabbed Doyen's arm as he walked back to his seat. Her grip was strong enough to leave bruises. What did you just do? She demanded. What were you thinking? I was thinking that we have spent 50 years being patient and polite and waiting for permission, Doyen said. I was thinking that nothing has changed because we keep playing by their rules. I was thinking that someone had to do something different. Different is one thing. Suicidal is another. Doyen smiled, but there was no humor in it. Maybe, but I would rather die trying than spend my whole life being told I am not good enough. Lieutenant Jisoo appeared beside them. Her face was still unreadable, but her eyes were sharp. Cadet Kong? That was either the bravest thing I have ever witnessed, or the most foolish. I have not decided which. Neither have I, Lieutenant. Jisoo studied him for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. I am transferring to the Threshold mission. Whatever ship they give us, I want to be on it. Nari stared at her. You cannot be serious. I've never been more serious in my life. Jisoo looked at Doyen. You just told the entire galaxy that doubt is our weapon. Now we have to prove it. And I am not going to let a cadet fight that battle alone. Doyen felt something warm spread through his chest. It was not certainty. He still had doubts. He still had fears. But for the first time in his life, he also had hope that maybe those doubts and fears did not have to stop him. Thank you, Lieutenant. Do not thank me yet. Thank me when we survive. Jisoo turned and walked toward the exit. You have 3 weeks. I suggest you use them wisely. Doyen watched her go. Then he looked at Nari, who was still gripping his arm like she thought he might float away if she let go. Well, he said, are you coming with me? Nari closed her eyes and took a deep breath. You are going to get us all killed, probably. This is insane, definitely. She opened her eyes. There was fear in them, but there was also something else. Something that looked like the beginning of belief. Fine, Someone has to keep your ship from falling apart. It might as well be me. Doyen smiled. For the first time since he stood up in the Grand Assembly Hall, it was a real smile. Then let us go change the galaxy. The ship was called the Persistent. It was a light cruiser, small by coalition standards, built for speed and survival rather than comfort. When Doyen first saw it floating in the Nexus Station dock, he thought it looked like a blade. Sharp and simple and ready to cut through anything in its path. Captain Bae Sunho stood beside him, studying the ship with eyes that had seen too much. Sunho was 42 years old, with gray hair at his temples and a slight limp in his right leg. 3 years ago, he'd commanded a colony defense vessel that had been destroyed, saving 10,000 civilian lives from a pirate attack. He had lost his ship, his career, and his ability to walk without pain. He had never lost his ability to lead. She is a good ship, Sunho said quietly. Small, but good. The Coalition gave us their oldest cruiser, hoping it would fall apart before we reached the threshold. They underestimated human engineering. Doyen nodded. He had been given a field promotion to navigation officer, which meant he would be responsible for plotting their course through the most dangerous space in the galaxy. The weight of that responsibility sat heavy on his shoulders. Do you think we can do this, Captain? Sunho was quiet for a long moment. I think that doubt you spoke about is already working inside you. Good. Never lose that. The moment you become certain you will survive is the moment you stop being careful. He put a hand on Doyen's shoulder. I do not know if we can do this, but I know that if anyone in the galaxy can, it is a ship full of humans who refuse to be told no. The crew came together over the following days. 47 people in total. Each one a volunteer who had watched Doyen's speech and decided that this was the moment they had been waiting for. Lieutenant Park Ji-soo arrived first, carrying a single bag and a datapad filled with tactical analysis of the threshold zone. She had spent the past 3 weeks studying every piece of information the Coalition had about the region, looking for patterns and possibilities that others had missed. I found something interesting, she told Sunho and Doyen in their first strategy meeting. The last fleet that entered the threshold used formation flying. They stayed together, moved together, tried to protect each other. I think that is why they died. Why? Doyen asked. Because the threshold does not care about formations. It attacks from every direction at once. A group of ships trying to stay together will trip over each other and slow each other down. But a single ship, moving fast and free, might be able to dance through the chaos. Sunho nodded slowly. One ship. One chance. No backup. Exactly. Jisoo's eyes were fierce. We cannot beat the threshold by being careful. We can only beat it by being better. Nari arrived next, bringing 3 engineering assistants and a case full of modifications she had designed herself. The Coalition scientist had called her ideas theoretically impossible. She had smiled and told them that theoretically impossible was her favorite kind of challenge. I have redesigned the engine cooling system, she explained to the crew during a technical briefing. Standard Coalition ships dump heat slowly to avoid damaging their components. I have built a system that dumps heat fast and hard. It will probably burn out after a few uses, but while it works, we will have speed that no one has ever seen before. What do you mean probably burn out? One of the engineers asked nervously. Nari shrugged. I mean, I have never tested it at full power. Could work perfectly. Could explode. Only one way to find out, Communications Officer Wang. Minji was a former linguist who had joined the military after spending 10 years studying alien languages. She was 28 years old, with quick hands and a quicker mind. And she could translate 47 different alien languages in real time. She could also curse fluently in all of them, a skill she demonstrated frequently during the preparation period. The observation vessel will be transmitting everything we do back to the Coalition, she told the crew. Every mistake, every close call, every moment of fear, they want to see us fail. They want footage of humans dying so they can show it to everyone and say they were right about us. And we give them something else to show, Doyen said. We give them humans succeeding. Tactical Officer Otaeon was the quietest member of the bridge crew. He was 30 years old, with kind eyes and gentle hands that seemed wrong for a weapons specialist. But when he sat at the targeting console during practice drills, those gentle hands moved with terrifying precision. He never missed. "I do not like killing," Taeyeon admitted to Doyen one evening as they watched the stars through the observation deck windows. "But I will do what I have to do to bring this crew home. Sometimes protecting the people you love means being willing to hurt the things that threaten them." The rest of the crew filled every role the ship needed: pilots, engineers, medics, scientists, maintenance, workers, cooks. Each one had a reason for being there. A moment in their life when they had been told they could not do something and had done it anyway. On the night before departure, Captain Sunho gathered everyone in the cargo bay. The space was cramped with 47 people, but no one complained. They stood shoulder to shoulder, humans from every part of Earth and every colony in human space, united by a single impossible mission. "Tomorrow we enter the threshold," Sunho said. His voice was calm, like a father talking to his children. "I will not lie to you. Some of us may not come back. The odds are against us. The entire galaxy expects us to fail." He paused and looked around at the faces watching him. "But I have learned something in my years of service. The odds do not know anything about human determination. The galaxy does not understand what we are capable of when we decide something matters. And this matters, not just for us, for every human who will come after us. For every child who will grow up in a galaxy that finally respects us." Sunho raised his hand in a fist. "We are the crew of the Persistent. We carry our doubts with us, and we fly anyway. Tomorrow, we show the galaxy what that means." 46 fists rose to meet his. The next morning, the Persistent launched from Nexus Station. Behind them, the Coalition observation vessel followed at a safe distance, ready to record humanity's failure. In the Grand Assembly Hall, Ambassador Velith watched the departure on a massive screen, waiting for the inevitable tragedy. But on the bridge of the Persistent, Doyan looked at the threshold zone ahead and felt something he had never expected to feel. He felt ready. The threshold zone began without warning. One moment the stars looked normal, and the next moment space itself seemed to bend and twist like water going down a drain. Doyan gripped his navigation console and watched his instruments go crazy with readings that should not have been possible. "Gravitational anomalies everywhere," Nari reported from her engineering station. Her voice was steady, but her knuckles were white against her console. "The laws of physics are more like suggestions in here." Captain Sunho sat in his command chair with the calm focus of a man who had faced death before. "Navigation, plot us a course through the first sector. Tactical, keep weapons ready. We do not know what we will find in here."
Aye.
Doyen studied the chaos ahead. The first sector was called the Crushing Tide, a region where waves of compressed gravity rolled through space like ocean swells during a storm. Ships caught by these waves would be flattened into thin sheets of metal. The last fleet had lost 3 vessels in the first 10 minutes. "Captain, I have an idea," Doyan said. "The gravity waves have a pattern. They are not random. If we adjust our speed and angle correctly, we might be able to ride them instead of fighting them." "Ride them?" Jisoo asked from her position beside Sunho. "Like a surfboard." "Exactly like that?" Sunho considered for a moment. "Do you know this will work?" "No, sir. I think it might work." "That is the best I can offer." A small smile crossed the captain's face. Doubt and action together. "Do it, navigation." Doyen's hands flew across his console. He calculated angles and speeds that no alien ship had ever tried, because no alien crew would have dared to guess. The Persistent dove toward the first gravity wave at exactly the right moment, caught the edge of the compressed space, and rode it forward like a surfer riding the perfect wave. The ship shook. Metal screamed. Someone in the back of the bridge whispered a prayer. But they did not die. They shot through the crushing tide faster than any ship in history, using the very thing that was meant to destroy them as fuel for their escape. "We are through Sector 1, Doyen announced. His voice was shaking, but he did not care. They were alive. On the observation vessel behind them, The Coalition crew stared at their screens in disbelief. No one had ever done that before. No one had even considered it possible. Sector 2 was a maze of asteroid fields moving in impossible patterns. Sector 3 was a region of radiation so intense that their shields nearly failed. Each challenge tested them in different ways, and each time the crew of the Persistent found solutions that should not have worked but did. Then came Sector 4. The silence, all sensors went dark. The screens showed nothing. The computers could not process what was happening, because there was nothing to process. Even the windows showed only absolute blackness, as if the universe itself had decided to stop existing. "I cannot see anything," Taeyan said from his weapon station. "Targeting systems are offline. Navigation is offline. Everything is offline." The bridge lights flickered and died. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in a dim red glow. The crew could only see each other through the faint illumination of backup systems that had no right to still be functioning. 6 hours, Jisoo said, checking her personal timepiece. "Our best estimate is that this sector takes 6 hours to cross. We need to navigate blind for 6 hours. How?" Nari asked. "We cannot see where we are going. We cannot see if something is about to hit us. We are flying through the dark with our eyes closed." Captain Sunho stood from his chair. He walked to the main window and stared into the absolute darkness. "We fly by instinct," he said. "I feel. The Coalition species rely on computers and sensors because they have always had them. They never learned to trust their own minds. But humans have been navigating by instinct for thousands of years. We found our way across oceans before we had compasses. We found our way through forests before we had maps. We will find our way through this." Doyen closed his eyes. He let go of the numbers and calculations that had guided him through the first 3 sectors. Instead, he listened. He felt. He let something ancient and human rise up from deep inside him, some part of his brain that his ancestors had used to survive in a world without technology. "Turn left," he said quietly. 15 degrees. The pilot followed his instructions without question. Down, slow, now faster. Hard right. For 6 hours, Doyen guided the Persistent through absolute darkness, using nothing but human instinct. He could not explain how he knew where to go. He simply knew. It was the same way his great-great-grandmother had known which plants were safe to eat without being told. The same way his ancestors had known. When a storm was coming by, the feeling in their bones. When the sensors finally came back online and the darkness lifted, the entire bridge crew let out a breath they had been holding for hours. They had crossed the silence without a single collision, without a single scratch. Minji was holding Taeyeon's hand. Neither of them let go. Sector 5 was a storm of quantum fluctuations that threatened to tear the ship apart at the atomic level. Sector 6 brought them face to face with the swarm. Automated defense drones from a civilization that had died 1,000,000 years ago. The drones activated when the Persistent entered their territory, and suddenly, the crew was fighting for their lives against 100. Enemy machines that felt no fear and knew no mercy. Taeyeon proved his worth in that battle. His gentle hands moved with terrible precision, destroying drone after drone with shots that seemed impossible. But there were too many, and they were too fast. Captain Taeyeon said, "I can see their central coordinator. It is a single unit controlling all the others. If I destroy it, the drones will shut down. But the explosion will be big. It will damage our engines." Sunho did not hesitate. "Take the shot," Taeyeon fired. The central coordinator exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the darkness of space. The drones froze, then tumbled away into the void, lifeless. But the shockwave hit the Persistent hard, and alarms began screaming throughout the ship. "Engines are failing," Nari reported. "We have lost 40% of our propulsion. I can maybe get us to 70% if I work miracles, but we are hurt bad." "Do what you can," Sunho ordered. "We have 1 sector left." Nari ran to engineering with her team, and for the next several hours they worked without rest, repairing damage and coaxing broken systems back to life. When they emerged, exhausted and covered in grease, the engines were running at 68%. Not good enough for normal standards, but maybe, just maybe, good enough to survive. Sector 7. The final gate. The exit point was visible in the distance. A place where normal space resumed and the nightmare of the threshold ended, but between the persistent and freedom was a wall of quantum static that flickered in and out of existence. The static created barriers that appeared and disappeared randomly. A ship that hit one of those barriers would be destroyed instantly. I cannot calculate a path, Doyon said, his voice hollow with exhaustion. The barriers are moving too fast. There is no pattern. There is nothing to analyze. On the observation vessel, Ambassador Velith watched with cold satisfaction. This was it. This was where humanity would finally fail. But Doyon kept watching the static. He let his eyes unfocus. He stopped trying to calculate and started trying to feel, the same way he had in the silence. And slowly, impossibly, he began to see something. There, he whispered, there is a path. It is not logical. It should not exist. But I can see it. Show me, Sunho said. Doyon plotted a course that made no mathematical sense. It zigzagged through the static in ways that seemed random but felt right. When he was finished, even he did not fully understand how he had done it. Captain, he said, I need you to trust me. Sunho looked at his young navigation officer. He saw the doubt in Doyon's eyes, the fear, the uncertainty. But he also saw something else. He saw the determination of a young man who had challenged the galaxy and refused to back down. I have always trusted you, son. From the moment you stood up in that assembly hall, take us home. Doyon's hands moved across the controls. The persistent screamed forward into the quantum static, threading through gaps that existed for only fractions of a second. Dodging barriers that appeared from nowhere, the ship shook. Sparks flew. Someone screamed, and then they were through. Clear space opened before them like the gates of heaven opening to we. Welcome the dead. The stars looked normal again. The instruments showed readings that made sense. They had done it. The Persistent had completed the threshold run. The observation vessel's bridge fell completely. Silent as the Persistent emerged from the threshold zone, Ambassador Velith stood frozen. Crystalline body flickering with colors that no one in the crew had ever seen before. The impossible had just happened. A single human ship crewed by a species that the galaxy had dismissed as too young and too weak had just accomplished what no one had managed in 200 years. They did it, someone whispered in the Grand Assembly Hall. 3,000 delegates watched the live feed. Some gasped. Some made sounds of disbelief. Some cheered, surprising even themselves, but most simply stared, unable to process what they were seeing. Everything they had believed about humanity was crashing down around them. On Earth, billions of people watched the news. In cafes and living rooms, in offices and schools, humans everywhere saw the battered little ship floating in clear space and felt something rise up in their chests. Pride, hope, a feeling that had been buried for 50 years under rejection and dismissal. On Nexus Station, the human population gathered in every public space to watch together. When the Persistent cleared the final sector, the cheering was so loud that alien residents 3 levels away came to see what was happening. The Persistent limped toward the docking bay, engines stuttering, hull scorched and damaged, but it was flying. That was all that mattered. It was still flying. Captain Sunho gathered the crew before they docked. They looked terrible. Exhausted, bruised, still shaking from the horrors they had survived. But they were alive, almost all of them. Before we leave this ship, Sunho said quietly, we remember those who did not make it home with us. He read 7 names. 7 crew members who had given their lives during the journey. An engineer who had been caught in an explosion during the drone battle. A pilot who had taken a piece of debris through the chest during a gravity wave. 5 others who had died in various moments of chaos, each one a hero in their own way. The crew bowed their heads. Some cried. Even Sunho, who had faced death so many times, felt tears on his cheeks. They died so that we could succeed, he said. Their sacrifice bought our victory. We will never forget them. When the Persistent finally docked, the greeting that waited for them was overwhelming. Humans packed every available space in the docking bay, screaming and crying and reaching out to touch the crew as they disembarked. Lieutenant Jisoo walked through the crowd with her head high, accepting handshakes and embraces from strangers who felt like family. Nari was lifted onto someone's shoulders, her exhausted face breaking into a genuine smile for the first time in days. Taeyeon and Minji walked side by side, their hands still intertwined. Neither of them had let go since the silence. Neither of them planned to, and Doyen walked through the middle of it all, surrounded by faces he had never seen but who all knew his name now. He was the cadet who had challenged the galaxy. He was the young man who had refused to accept that doubt was weakness. He had become something larger than himself, a symbol of what humanity could achieve when it stopped waiting for permission. Ambassador Velith requested an immediate session of the Grand Assembly. When the delegates gathered, the mood in the hall was different than it had been 3 weeks ago. The dismissive confidence was gone. In its place was something that looked almost like respect. Doyen stood in the same spot where he had first challenged the coalition. He was still wearing his flight suit, still covered in the grime and sweat of survival. He had not slept in 2 days, but he stood straight and met Velith's eyes without flinching. "You asked how doubt could be a weapon," he said. "Now you have seen the answer." The hall was silent, waiting. "Certainty makes you stop looking for solutions," Dojan continued. "When you are certain, you follow the rules that worked before. You use the methods that succeeded in the past. You assume that the universe will behave the way it has always behaved. But the universe does not care about your assumptions. The threshold does not follow your rules. And the only way to survive something impossible is to doubt everything you think you know and find a new answer." He paused, looking around at the faces watching him. Humans doubt. We doubt our leaders and our scientists and our own abilities, but we do not let that doubt stop us. We use it. We let it push us to try harder, think differently, refuse to give up even when everything tells us we should. Doubt is not the opposite of strength. Doubt is the beginning of strength. Ambassador Velith stepped forward. The Chancellor's crystalline body was calm now. The flickering colors settled into a soft, steady glow. "Cadet Kong Doyon, the Coalition has watched your species for 50 years. We have seen your ships, your technology, your military capabilities. We have measured everything that can be measured. And in all that time, we missed the most important thing about humanity." The Chancellor bowed. It was a deep bow, a gesture of respect that no High Chancellor had ever offered to a younger species in recorded history. "We missed your heart," Velith said. "We missed the fire that burns inside you, the determination that refuses to die, the ability to look at the impossible and say, 'You will try anyway.' These are not things that can be measured, but they are the things that matter most." The Chancellor straightened. "Humanity is hereby admitted to the Vanguard Fleet. Full membership. Full respect. You have earned your place among us." The hall erupted in applause. Not from the humans this time, but from the alien delegates who had spent centuries dismissing humanity as insignificant. The sound rolled over Doyen like a wave, and for a moment he felt like he might fall over from the weight of it. But he did not fall. He stood, and he accepted what humanity had finally earned. 1 year later, Commander Kong Doyan stood on the bridge of the Undaunted, the first Vanguard vessel with a mixed human-alien crew. He had been promoted 3 times in 12 months, rising faster than anyone in Coalition history. Not because of politics or connections, but because everyone who worked with him saw the same thing. A leader who carried his doubts openly and used them to become better. Captain Yoon Nari stood beside him, arguing cheerfully with a Gorveth engineer about whether her latest engine modification would work perfectly or explode spectacularly. She had bet 50 credits that it would do both at the same time. The galaxy had changed since the Persistent emerged from the threshold. Species that had never questioned their certainty began to wonder if maybe they had been missing something. Scientists started testing impossible theories. Commanders started trying unconventional strategies. Slowly, the culture of the Coalition began to shift. Doubt spread like a gentle infection, and everywhere it went, carried possibility with it. Doyon looked out at the stars and thought about everything that had brought him here. The fear, the uncertainty, the moments when he had been absolutely sure that he was going to fail. All of those doubts had been part of his journey. All of them had made him stronger. A message came through from Nexus Station. Someone was asking for advice. A young alien cadet had been told that her idea was impossible, and she wanted to know what to do about it. Doyon smiled and composed his reply. Being told something is impossible is just the beginning, he wrote. The question is not whether you can succeed. The question is whether you will try. And if you have doubt in your heart, then you are exactly the right person to change the galaxy. Because doubt will make you work harder than anyone who has ever been certain. He sent the message and turned back to the stars. Somewhere out there, someone was about to do the impossible. Someone was about to fail and try again and fail again until they finally succeeded. Someone was about to look at their fears and use them as fuel. That was the legacy of the persistent. Not that humans had proven they were strong, but that they had shown the galaxy something even more important. They had shown that doubt, properly used, was the most powerful force in the universe, and the universe would never be the same.